Hi, my name is Joel Comiskey, and I'd like to talk to you from my book, Myths and Truths of the Cell-Based Church. And specifically, I'd like to talk in this video about church growth myths and truths, and also leadership myths and truths. And the first myth is that church growth is the driving motivation for becoming a cell church. And a lot of pastors think that the reason why they need to become a cell church is to grow. So it's all about growth. And I have to admit, that was my motivation in the beginning, studying under Peter Wagner at Fuller School of World Missions. And I thought that it was all about church growth. But the truth is that theology is the true foundation upon which to build a cell church. Theology. Ralph Neighbor, the guru, the pioneer of small group ministry in the United States, once said that theology breeds methodology. And I think that's so true, that we really need to understand the why of cell-based ministry, and that's because it's biblical. Making disciples who make disciples. So that needs to motivate us, and God will give the growth in His timing, but we are motivated because of the biblical base. Now, another myth is that if I choose to become a cell church, my church will grow. And a lot of pastors think, okay, I'm going to become a cell church and God must now grow my church because other churches have grown through the cell church strategy. But the truth is that only Jesus can give true organic growth. It's Jesus that actually causes cell churches to grow. I was at Myrtle Beach one time walking along one of those beautiful beaches, and I just had a vision, kind of like an image, and I saw a kite on the sand in my vision. And the kite was just sitting there on the sand. And I thought to myself, well, kites are supposed to be flying. And then I realized, well, this kite needs the wind to carry it into the sky. And, I compared that to cell churches. Cell church might be a great strategy. It might look really nice, but unless it's the wind of the Spirit is carrying that cell church strategy, it won't go anywhere. And so it's just so essential to say, Lord, would you do it? You got to do this. One time I was in another church there in the United States, and the pastor was very frustrated that his church wasn't growing more rapidly. And he was even expressing his frustration in front of his leaders. And I thought, this isn't good. On the way to the airport, he started complaining again. Maybe I need to do something else or go to another church. And I said, who gives the growth? You or God? And only God can really give organic growth. And we just need to hang in there. God will do it in His time. And that's what I want to say to you, Pastor. He'll give you the growth. Another myth is if my church does not grow, I'm not successful. And so often pastors feel unsuccessful because their church is not growing more rapidly. And yet the truth is that success should be measured by faithful effort rather than results. It's so essential that we understand that if we are following the Spirit of God, and then allowing Him to stir us to make disciples who make disciples, well, then He needs to give the growth. And we're successful in the process. I remember I was doing a seminar with Mario Vega, the pastor of that huge church in El Salvador, and he was talking about the incredible growth going on in El Salvador. And I remember during one of the breaks, I talked to a church planting team that was planting a church in this upper class area of Guatemala. And they were saying, are we doing something wrong? We're not seeing the type of growth that Mario Vega is talking about. And I just said, you know what? You're successful if you keep on pressing ahead. If it's going to be harder among those upper class people. You're pioneering a new area. Let me pray for you. And as I prayed for them, afterwards, I noticed that tears were streaming from their eyes. They just needed that word of encouragement. And I want to say that to you, Pastor. Be faithful. God will reward you according to your faithfulness, not according to what happens in your church. That's a myth. And I believe the truth is your reward in heaven will be according to your faithful, persistent ministry in making disciples who make disciples. Now, another myth is that it's okay to simply add cell ministry to what you're already doing. The truth is that a pastor needs to make cell ministry the central priority. Some pastors just want to add cell ministry. They've heard that other churches are successful. Sure, I'll add that on. But reality is that you need to concentrate. You need to say no to all those other things that are going to crowd into your schedule and concentrate on making disciples who make disciples. And so that means giving your energy to cell-based ministry. And I always tell pastors, count the cost. Don't even go into cell-based ministry unless you're willing to give it your all and concentrate on making disciples who make disciples. Now, related to that myth is that lead pastors need to be available to everyone. And some lead pastors feel like they have to, counsel everyone that walks into the church building. After all, they got the training, they're getting paid. But the reality is this: effective cell church leaders delegate. They understand that cell ministry is all about raising up the lay people to do the work of the ministry. In fact, I love when they say, have you talked to your cell leader? Have you talked to other members in your cell? Because see, that's where really the action is, when the cell and the cell members can visit them and counsel and minister. Now, another myth is that there are fewer problems in the cell church than traditional ministry. The reality is that cell church ministry reveals problems often hidden under the busyness of traditional ministry. It's easier in one sense just to have a traditional church. People show up on Sunday and say, hey, I'm here, Pastor, but they're not really sharing what's happening in their lives. When you start cell-based ministry, people get into small groups, they start sharing their problems, and it might appear that there are more problems, but in reality, the healing has just begun. Because when people start sharing, when they get prayer, and God begins to move, there's an in-depth discipleship that takes place. I was in Puerto Rico one time, and one elder said, boy, when we started cell-based ministry, that's when all the problems started happening. But then he said, but you know what? We're on the road to recovery. God is really causing our church to be healthier. We're practicing the one another's. And that's my prayer for you, Pastor, that you would allow people to share and also to receive healing. Now, another myth is if you fail, try something else. The reality is that failing will lead you to discover what works best in your context. In fact, somebody said that you have to fail 3 times in cell ministry to get it right. And I believe you need to probably fail more. So don't be afraid of failure. That's how we learn, is by making mistakes. Hang in there, Pastor. My book, Myths and Truths of the Cell-Based Church, I believe will help you take the next step in cell-based ministry. God bless you. If you like this video, please click on like and subscribe to our channel, but also check out the resources on our website.